So you're thinking about banking offshore. Well, this video is going to tell you why that's a horrible idea, which might sound counterintuitive since we help people open offshore bank accounts, but offshore banking isn't for everyone or every situation. So I'm going to give you the 7 reasons why offshore banking might not make sense for you. Now, in case this is the first time we've met, my name is Chris. I'm the head of banking relationships at GlobalBanks. We help investors, entrepreneurs, and businesses solve cross-border banking challenges. And yes, that does include helping people open offshore bank accounts. But we're pragmatic, and we don't think that everyone should bank offshore. Instead, we think people should figure out what they're optimizing for, and then choose the best place to bank accordingly. Sometimes that might be an offshore banking hub. Other times, onshore or midshore banking might be a better option. And other times, you don't need a bank account at all. Bottom line, you need to think through a broader strategy in order to accomplish your goals. Whether that's tax optimization, asset protection, enhanced privacy, or even just making international payments. So with this in mind, let's take a look at the 7 reasons why offshore banking might not be a solution for you. But first, if you like these kind of videos where I dig into the strategy and tactics of international and offshore banking, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of great videos planned for you, so you'll definitely want to be notified when we publish. Okay, let's dig in. And the first reason that we're going to discuss is a bit controversial, and it's all about privacy. Now, the reason that it's controversial is because most people, other people, don't know how information sharing works. They think that if a country isn't a signatory to CRS, then their information isn't going to be shared. But that's not how information sharing works. And I recently did a whole video on this where I explain the mechanics of information sharing and even expose a few countries that other people tell you are secrecy jurisdictions, which totally aren't. I'll share that video with you at the end in case you want to dig into those countries for yourself. But the point is, if you're looking to open an offshore bank account because you don't want your financial information shared with your country of tax residence, then that's not an option anymore. Now, the second reason is similar to privacy, at least in the intent, and it's asset protection. Now, does an offshore bank account give you asset protection? No. Can an offshore bank account make it more difficult for creditors to freeze your money and seize your assets? Yes. Especially if no one knows that you have those accounts in those particular countries. But in order for an offshore account to offer any real level of protection, those funds almost always need to be wrapped up in an appropriate asset protection structure, which usually means a trust, foundation, or various entities that are domiciled in asset protection jurisdictions. Think Cook Islands or Nevis. Only then are your funds really protected, and usually out of the reach of creditors or even governments. So if you want an offshore bank account for asset protection, you should really be looking into which structures are going to offer you the best protection, not which bank accounts. Now, switching gears, let's talk about taxes. And that's because lots of people think they can open an offshore bank account and then pay no tax on the money or investments offshore. Well, you could, up until the mid-2000s, at least at certain banks and for certain people. Probably one of the most famous examples of this was UBS. Basically, UBS was helping US citizens evade taxes. The US Department of Justice said there were about 52,000 Americans that were hiding billions of dollars in untaxed assets in secret Swiss bank accounts up until about 2007. And that translated into hundreds of millions of dollars in lost tax revenue for the IRS. Now again, lots of people thought they could just open offshore accounts and pay no taxes. But in reality, those taxes were still owed. The owners just didn't report them. So opening offshore didn't actually optimize their taxes. Instead, these people were just trying to shortcut the process, not optimizing correctly, and setting themselves up for a lot of pain down the line. Now, I don't know why they did that, but the short story is they were taking advantage of the fact that there were no information sharing rules at the time. But that's changed, and whether you're an American, Canadian, Australian, it doesn't matter. Most countries share information today. So if you are focused on tax optimization, what you really need to be thinking about is, where are you a tax resident? Because it's not where your bank account is domiciled that matters, it's where you're domiciled. And in some cases, where you're a citizen. Okay, this next reason why you shouldn't bank offshore is if you want to bank in low quality countries, because that's a major reason why you shouldn't bank offshore. Now, we're not surprised when people come to us wanting to bank in certain places that we consider not suitable for offshore banking. And frankly, there are situations when it makes a lot of sense to open accounts in these countries, but that's not the case for the vast majority of people looking to open their first offshore account. So why do people still want to bank in low quality jurisdictions? Well, a few of these countries have incredible marketing teams. Even a few of the banks in these countries are excellent at promoting themselves to less informed individuals. But the fact is, if a bank or even a country doesn't have stable correspondent banking relationships, CBRs, or if they don't have competent compliance teams that can ensure your account isn't held alongside some shady black market peso dealer, then you probably shouldn't be banking there. Now, we're a bit tough on these low quality countries, and most of the time it isn't their fault that they can't offer better banking to foreigners. But what kills me is when I see other people, especially guys that claim to be trusted figures in the international banking space, talking about low quality banks in low quality countries and promoting them like they're legitimate places to open accounts when they're not. I actually did a big video on this where I talk about 11 countries that you shouldn't bank in. I'll link that video at the end of this to make sure you can avoid them for yourself. But the point is, if you're only considering banking in lower quality banking hubs, you shouldn't. You either need to consider more reputable jurisdictions, stick with onshore or midshore banking instead, or really think through why you want to bank there in the first place and what you're trying to optimize for. Okay, now the next reason that offshore banking might not be for you is if you can only afford to make low deposits. Now listen, there are places that you can open offshore with really low deposits, like $1,500. But most of these places are gonna be in that video that I just referenced of places you shouldn't bank. And even if you go up to the next level, say $5,000, you can open accounts in reputable banking hubs with reputable international banks. But at $5,000, you should only be looking to open accounts if you're trying to achieve a specific goal. Maybe that's getting access to a payment card with multi-currency accounts. Or maybe you live in a country with lots of corruption and you're just desperate to get some of your money out. Or you want to establish a foothold in another country. Those reasons make sense. And if you can only afford to deposit $5,000 and those are the sort of things that you're optimizing for, then have at it. But if you're an American, Canadian, Australian, or basically a citizen of any developed or Western country and you're looking to bank offshore, you should really be looking to come in at higher deposit levels. And in most cases, that means above 6 figures, typically between $150,000 and $250,000, because that's where you can start to access reputable banks in reputable offshore banking hubs with low fees and strong product offerings that you can then actually benefit from in terms of going offshore. Now, that doesn't mean you can't open at lower levels. We help people do this all the time, but it isn't optimal, and whether it makes sense really depends on why you want to bank offshore in the first place. Which leads us to our next reason that offshore doesn't make sense, and that is not having a reason to bank offshore. Now, reasons are subjective. I mean, no one has a reason to own a 150-foot yacht or a $50 million private jet or even a $1 million sports car. But people buy these items all the time because they want to. And similarly, a lot of people don't have a reason to open an offshore bank account, besides the fact that they just want one. And frankly, that reason is good enough. But if you don't have a reason and you don't have enough money to open an offshore bank account, or you don't have a way to make that offshore bank account benefit you, instead of just being a financial burden and slowly eating away at your deposit, then there are usually much better ways to burn your money, or at least better ways for you to bank your money. And that brings us to the seventh and final reason why you shouldn't bank offshore, which is when you have better options available. Now, it's true that a few offshore banking hubs are among the best in the world. Think Switzerland, Singapore, or even Monaco for certain clients. But for a lot of people, what they think of as a traditional offshore banking hub isn't the best fit for them. And they can unlock a lot more value and benefits if they are willing to explore more onshore and midshore banking options instead, like the United States and even a few lesser known European banking hubs. What I'm saying here is opening an offshore account shouldn't be about opening in a specific country. It should be about figuring out what you're optimizing for and then choosing where to open based on those goals. And that's exactly what we help our clients do through our account opening services, which you can learn more about at globalbanks.com/insider. And if you want to check out the other videos that I reference, you can see the 11 countries everyone else tells you to bank in that you should actually avoid right here. And you can get the full breakdown about information sharing and non-CRS countries over here, including a few countries people tell you are secrecy jurisdictions that really aren't. Though I also share one actual secrecy jurisdiction, which is a developed country in case you're interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.